I'm not able to hear you right at the moment, but I'm just talking to our technician. Welcome. My name is Marilyn Cade. I'm acting as the Mistress of Ceremonies for the first segment, and my colleague and the Chief Organizer and Planner and Architect of this session, Wisdom, will replace me so that I can move to the audience in just a few minutes. So I'm just going to make very brief opening comments, and I want to welcome all of you and try to set the stage for what we're going to do today. And then we are going to hear from our host country ambassador, Thomas Schneider. Very, very quickly, this is a working session. We are faced with the kind of challenge in measuring and planning and analyzing that the world faced when e-commerce was first conceptualized back in the 80s and 90s. Up until that time, the way we measured what was going on in the high-tech world was to count households, businesses, the number of mainframes and terminals, and landlines. We didn't have mobile phones, we didn't have online applications, so all of the agencies responsible for statistical reporting had to completely rethink how they were going to gather information and what they were going to count and how they were going to report it. Today, we're accustomed to having really in-depth statistical analysis from the UN organizations, UNCTAD, WTO, ITU, and more, about health from WHO, and about labor from ILO. And we're accustomed to having reports from think tanks like Gartner and others that tell us how technology is growing and how it is being used. But in order to adapt that particular measurement and analysis environment to help us measure the SDGs, we have to go far beyond that. And our data gathering has to change. The people we gather it from, the institutions we gather it from, and the companies we gather it from, and the individuals we gather it from have to change. So this is a working session to learn from many who are working in this space and to think about what our recommendations are to them and to ourselves, including to the private sector, not just to government agencies and think tanks, about what we need to do differently so that we know what to measure, how to analyze, to help to inform planning so that we will make progress in achieving the SDGs. I would like to turn this over to our host country speaker, Ambassador Snyder, and then we will move forward with the rest of the program.
Thank you, Marilyn, and good morning, everybody. My name is Thomas, as you've heard, and we hope that some more people will make it through the security impasse at the UN here, because we really think, and I personally think, that this is one of the most important sessions, because this is fundamental. The use of ICTs has become, I think we all agree, fundamental to achieving the SDGs. The thing is that just not everybody is really thinking about this in a strategic way. So maybe just to give you a quick experience on what we, how we deal with this on national level. We have the SDG, the Swiss Development Corporation, not corporation, agency, it's called it's part of the government, plus another federal office that deals normally with landscape and space planning and space allocation. And they have started what they call an Agenda 2030 baseline assessment, where they go through all the 17 SDGs and the 169 or whatever they are sub-goals of the SDGs, and look at what does this mean for our country, where are we standing on national level, where are we standing with our development activities to support other countries. And they haven't by themselves taken into account digitalization, digital transformation, or anything like that in a systematic way. So when we were invited, that was an open process, also a multi-stakeholder process with academia, civil society, businesses on national level. Then it was us as the Office of Communication, at the same time as the IT department of the public administration, that both we told them, listen, friends, you're forgetting something very important. If you look at the SDGs, digital transformation of economy and society applications, this has an impact on basically all of the SDGs, and actually most of the, or a lot of the sub goals. And what we provided them with is basically a simple chart with an indication on to what extent we think that every particular line is impacted, that can be positively or negatively, by digitization, just by adding 1D, 2Ds, or 3Ds to every SDG. And we had a session with them, and they started to understand that actually they cannot undertake an assessment on national level on where we are with achieving the SDGs without looking ahead just a few years and thinking about the effects of the digital transformation on each of the SDGs. And so now this has become a full part of our national SDG strategy, and we are having regular meetings, and we've also brought in other stakeholders that did not work on development issues properly or concretely, but actually come from the, let's say, experts in different fields of digitization. And now there's a cooperation that is going on that is very useful, but they themselves wouldn't have thought of this in the beginning. So this is, in our view, it is fundamental that you have a development strategy for the national level that is aligned with the digital strategy, or no matter what you call it, because if this is not aligned, then you lose synergy effects and you lose knowledge or awarenesses that it would be a pity not to benefit, because it is all there. Also our colleagues from the development agency, they use ICTs in all their projects, from microfunding issues to systems where they support the sharing of market data for whatever agricultural products are produced. But they haven't looked at these things with a systematic focus on what is the effects, what are the opportunities, but also what are the challenges that people face when using these ICTs. And they are now basically trying to develop a more systematic approach, having internal exchanges about experiences with these things. And so we really think that this has helped us using or seizing the potential, or is helping us. We are still in the making of all of this. But just to give you that message that also we had to learn, and people in our administration had to learn, that they need to connect in order to understand what is going on, in order to be able to support projects with other partners in an efficient way, and knowing what they may be facing in terms of challenges when they undertake projects with ICT components, and how to deal with this in a more systematically and strategic way. So this is just a national experience that I wanted to share with you. Unfortunately, I cannot leave for too long because I have to prepare for another session, for the high-level session that we're having at 10. But I really think that this is a fundamental issue, so I wish you a very good and fruitful and hopefully enlightening and mutually inspiring discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thomas, thank you so much also, because we know you have a very busy schedule, both as in your role as host, but also this important session that is coming up. And one thing I want to commend to anyone who is a newcomer to IGF is that we are very, very fortunate that all of our sessions are transcribed and recorded as well, so that if you miss a session that you're particularly interested in, you will be able to catch up on it. So while we're going to miss the great session that the host country, has organized that you're going to, I'm sure many of us will be looking to see what's going on there, and we'll be able to then know that you can look back to us as well. So thank you again, and thank you to Switzerland for being our host for the IGF for 2018. 2017.
Thank you all.
Well, okay, I was looking ahead. I'm going to turn over to, as I said, the chief architect of this, and I just want to recognize Zena, who is sitting with us and will be with us for at least the first hour, who is also one of the co-organizers, and thank her as well for being part of the organizing team. Now, fortunately, my job is over. I get to hand off to Wisdom, and I get to come be part of the audience.
Thank you, Marilyn, and then thanks for all the support. So we continue with the first part of the session. We have the executive director of Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data. I think they are doing more work in relation to data roadmaps, specifically in the developing countries. I think they've been to Ghana a couple of times, and other part of Africa. So she will also be giving us a statement, and then after her, then we'll have the CEO of Godan to also give us a statement, and then we have from Egypt as well. So Dr. Claire, if you're on the line, can you please respond? Okay. Yeah, I think she's on the line, but then, so I think we have to move on, and then as at when she comes on, we'll give her the platform to talk. So I will turn to the Godan CEO, Mr. Andre, to give us his statement. Andre, you can introduce yourself and let the audience know you, who you are, and then you can give the statement.
Thank you very much, Wisdom. As you've heard, I'm the... Yeah, I think it's working now. Yeah. I'm the Executive Director of the Global Open Data Initiative for Agriculture and Nutrition. We believe that one of the best ways to achieve global food security, global nutrition for everyone, and in the end of the day, the improvement of the quality of life for everyone, especially on the horizon of 2050, based on demographics and climate change, among other problems that we have to overcome, is through the exchange of knowledge and the exchange of data, which is the underlying source of knowledge. During my lifetime, and yours, I guess, we went through 3 quiet revolutions. The first one was the internet, because that connected the world in a way that never happened before. Second was intelligent phones. That allowed and allows many countries to leapfrog steps in their development. Now you can go in the most remote parts of Africa and Asia and other continents, and you find people with mobile phones. There may not be phone lines, but there's mobile phones. There's therefore mobile banking, and there's a lot of interactions that just weren't possible a few years ago. And the third revolution is data, because that brings the internet and all the knowledge that it carries at your fingertips. A lot of smart applications are being developed to maximize the use of that and bring big data to the common people, to the farmers, to the regular guy down the street, to you and me. I'm thinking just one or two, and it's very important. It made me think of a couple of examples, but just to illustrate why this is important, they estimate that in 2025, the world is going to generate about 180 zettabytes of data. So I don't know if you know what a zettabyte is, but 180 zettabytes of data is 180 plus 21 zeros after that. That's the number of bytes of data that the world will be generating. So there's no shortage of data. So the issue is, how do we make use of it, and how can we bring data, the internet and the data it carries, to the reach of everyone. That's why these applications are very important, because they make it in a very transparent, easy way. I'll just quote one or two as an example. There's one application, we have about 600 partners. For those who don't know GoDan, I invite you to go to our website. It's godan.info. We have 618 partners as of yesterday. Among the applications, I'm thinking of one by PlantWise and another one called Weed Scout. What that does is, the most remote farmer, when he or she sees, let's say, it's maize dying, turning yellow, or having some kind of bug in it and doesn't know what it is, all he or she needs to do is to take a picture of that. And then through artificial intelligence, it goes to a central database, to big data, and in a fraction of a second, it comes back to you and tells you what the problem is and what is the best way to address it. So that's one of the ways to bring big data to everyone, thanks to modern technology and the availability of this mass of information there is. Other approaches also, I'm thinking now of geodata, which is also another way to leapfrog technology in terms of managing agriculture and managing environment in respective countries. The problem with geodata is that it's the flip side of its positive side. Now sensors and satellites are so accurate, they generate so much information that it becomes massive. So unless you have huge computing capacity, it's very difficult to absorb all of that. But thanks to new applications and new search engines, what you can do now is two things: either just to download the part of the information that you need, or to leave the information where it is and do your processing within the cloud, so that you only deal with the answers, with the results of the research that you're doing. But to make that happen, of course, there's a number of obstacles to overcome: technological, training, capacity building. And that's part of the discussion today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andre. And then we now move to Mr. Gamel.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Hussam El Gamal. I'm the chairman of the Information and Decision Support Center at the Egyptian Cabinet. And fortunately, I used to be a MAG member for 3 years, past 3 years, so I'm quite familiar with the IGF. And for this session, data and the SDGs, it seemed to me like it is exactly what worked for the Information and Decision Support Center of the Cabinet. I need to explain this in a brief. This IDSC has been in place for the last 30 years, and with the aim of gathering the information related to all projects, plans, and execution, and relation with the citizen in a hub, and then making the right analysis and providing the right decision support with that regards. With the movement and improvement of the digitization, this has been used to serve the purpose. So while in Egypt we have two organizations, one is CAPMAS, which is the statistical organization responsible for making statistics. We have IDSC that is responsible of making the M&E, that is responsible for connecting between the citizen and the government, that is responsible for analyzing the information that is gathered and making proper suggestion to the decision maker for taking corrective action. When 2030 agenda took place, and we have our vision in Egypt for 2030, it became a mandate for IDSC using its monitoring mechanism and analyzing mechanism to provide the corrective monitoring and improvement directions. What we do is we do different things. One of them, for example, is digital development maps. We are connected with all the government authorities. We get through a data management system updated information about the execution of the plans and the big or the large project the government is undertaking. And this is gathered on a daily basis, digitally, from the data management system. And using this, we are building geo maps, layers, different layers that gather information from all sectors all together. So we have the infrastructure layer, we have the agriculture layer, we have the industrial and economic layer, we have the services layer, we have the social protection layer, etc. And with this, we are able to visualize the real gaps and opportunities that exists and put accordingly supporting suggestion for the decision of the Prime Minister and the Cabinet. This is just an example of how data can be, once collected properly and analyzed and visualized, help making a difference in the decision process. On top of this layer, we have teams that are working on M&I, monitoring and improvement, and which complete the next step of the value chain by analyzing the plans of the government and the information that is coming regarding execution of the different projects. And then there is we are using DSS systems that analyze to what degree the activities of different sectors are complementing each other or are not. So we can put better synergy among them. Another aspect is the governance aspect. One of the roles that IDSC is doing is improving governance. Being reporting to the cabinet, to the Prime Minister, we are to monitor all activities of the government and the relation between the citizen and the government. And once again, to do this, we have our digital tools. We have the centralized e-complaint system for the government, where on a daily basis we are receiving thousands of complaints from all over the country digitally through the website called shakwa.eg, shakwa.eg, and it's receiving it's a complete CRM system that receives complaints from citizen related to any government need, and this is gathered again in our data center in order to do two things. One, to follow up with the different government authorities the response and the execution of the complaint within a certain time limit that is allowed to each different type of complaint, and also to analyze this for two things. One is to what degree different authority is responding as required, and if there is any potential corruption. Whenever there is many complaints coming from certain area and certain sector, this would give an indication there is a possibility of a corruption there. And then we take another action with another authority in order to be able to see how to take a corrective action with that regards. We have also an application called IGABI. IGABI means positive, being positive. And this application role is to make a connection between the citizen on smartphones and the government. It has 3 modules. One of them is doing information, providing the citizen on regular basis with information about the activities of the government in different projects, as well as different information about how to handle what are the new laws that applied, and etc. But there is a module for e-complaint system, and there is a module for observation. So a citizen can simply pass by a road and find that there is a problem there, there is something happening, and he can just take a picture with the geo indication, coordinates, send it to us, and then we guide the right authority to take action upon this in order to have a swift corrective action. We have many other things with that, so I don't want to take it more. What I'm saying is that there is a model that can be analyzed. This IDSC is a model of how, in a digital world, in a developing country, we can optimize the use of information gathered from the citizen side and from the government side, and help supporting taking proper decision by the government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll turn to Dr. Claire. Again, I think we have to use our headphones. So, Dr. Claire, if you can hear me, can you please proceed? Hello?
It's muted.
Hello, doctor, can you hear me? She's responding. Can you hear her? Okay, Dr. Claire, please, can you please speak up, and then you may proceed. Yes, I can hear you, but very far. Yes, we can hear you. Kindly introduce yourself, and then you can proceed.
Organizations I know are
Thank you. But before you go, I think there is one question for you. So we turn to the remote moderator.
Good morning, everyone. So we do have a question to Claire. Does your organization work with civil society organization or only government? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We hope you still be with us for the second part of the session. So we're now going to move on to presentation. So I'm going to invite Mr. Tommy to come on stage. He is the Chief Executive Officer for Mobile Phones, and they are going to present on the challenges of data collection and disaggregation, the case of developing countries. And then we'll follow by Omar, but it looks like Omar is not online. He wants to do a remote presentation, but he's not online. So the next one will be Tanya. So after Tommy. So can we please have his presentation?
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here. My name is Tommy. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Mobile Phones. It's a company we started out last year trying to solve a huge problem for Africa, but I'll come back to that. Next slide. Interesting. So for a long time, Africa is regarded as the next frontier. And that explains why every year, NGOs, businesses, the international community invest billions of dollars trying to, on investment decisions, on projects that take Africa to a certain point. However, we have huge problems. It's the fact that we're spending a lot of money. However, the market still looks somewhat like this. Next slide, please. It still looks. Oh, okay. That's fine. So, however, the markets kind of still look somewhat like this. So, we're putting in a lot of money into it, but it still looks like a black box. It is almost entirely impossible to get reliable data out of Africa. And when we're able to do that, it takes months to get it out. And it takes another month to try and clean up the data and present it. And if you did decide to verify the data, try to trace it to a source, that is almost impossible. And we know what the issues are. They're clear to us. Next slide, please. The first thing is the fact that the infrastructure is very poor, which makes it almost non-existent. For example, is the fact that a big chunk of the population is still offline with poor network, either no network connectivity or poor network connectivity. So you cannot build a system that will be online real time to feed data all the time. The fact that these communities are in remote areas, which then means that traveling with a laptop or a desktop becomes an issue. And there could be theft issues also involved in it. Now, all these things make the logistics of gathering data extremely impossible. We've been doing, for a long time, we've been trying to do surveys using paper forms or trying to do routine data collection using paper forms, which is a huge problem on its own. And the fact that if there's any data at all, a lot of the data is all offline. 90% of it is almost entirely offline, written in registers that are probably not kept properly or written in somebody's head, and then it gets difficult to actually, over time, the quality reduces. So we decided we needed to give something else a try, see what we can do to solve the problem. Next slide, please. So our assumption was the infrastructure doesn't exist. So what can we do to build this infrastructure? And does the infrastructure mean that we have to spend a lot of money and then spend a lot of time to implement it so that it can work? What if infrastructure doesn't have to be this big, gigantic, massive equipment to get things done? Africa has been known to leapfrog technology for a very long time. For example, I didn't grow up with a landline in my house. We moved like straight from, without having phone lines, straight to mobile devices. So we need to keep looking for ways to leapfrog these technologies and move to something more granular, smaller, and then we can collaborate. So what if the infrastructure we needed was a network of interconnected mobile devices? People with mobile devices, entrepreneurs, students, health specialists, who are willing to give extra time to go to the closest community around them to get data on behalf of the international community, on behalf of businesses, on behalf of NGOs. And in this case, they can do it consistently, they can do it periodically, and they're doing it with their mobile devices, which they already use to do WhatsApp and Facebook and the likes. And by doing that, it kind of turns the tide all over his head, sorry. And what that means is that all of a sudden, people who are going to try and look for data now sit in their offices and they're getting constant local and tactical feedback from the communities in their HQ, on their dashboards. Then all they need to worry about now is how do we analyze this data, make sense out of it, and interpret it as fast as possible. Next slide, please. So we started out this model in Nigeria, and we're quickly expanding it to Ghana. I'll talk about Ghana in a bit. We built an agent network across the country. Today, we have access to over 100,000 across 774 local governments in Nigeria. Individuals with smartphone devices, and they're willing to gather data in their spare time. And we called it crowdforce because we believe in the tremendous force we can create when a crowd of people come together towards a common goal. Next slide, please. And here's how it works. So today we work with organizations, they define their data requirements, we structure it into a digital form, a dynamic digital form with instructions, and then we push it across all the network. So everyone across the country and communities, they get notifications, and they see the instructions, and they go and carry out this task in their spare time. Many of the time, they go to communities not far away, maybe 30 minutes or 1 hour away from them. Some of them hire a bike and they move around gathering the data. Because they're using mobile devices, they're able to capture data offline. And then when they get back to the community where they live, where there's internet, everything synchronizes to the cloud. They're able to capture pictures. They're able to capture GPS. All the data they collect is timestamped, so we can use all that to verify, and it's tagged against them. And more importantly, if you need to verify the data in 10 years' time, you can trace it to when it was collected, who collected it, and interview the enumerator who collected it. And so what that means is that we're able to gather verifiable and reliable data way faster than anyone else can get it. I'll move to next slide. Next slide, please. So a few case studies we've been using this for. Remember that what we've done is we've tried to build an infrastructure. So that means that we're working with people to use the infrastructure and see how it can help them. So one of the areas we're able to help address is geospatial data. We're able to help organizations crowdsource GPS data of points and places, for example, health locations. For a long time, we didn't know where our health locations were. We didn't know what services they offered, and we didn't know how they looked like. And then there were some that were not registered that were functioning. But what we're able to do is, in an average of 5 days, we're able to crowdsource GPS locations of health facilities, and along with their pictures and the services they offer. So what that means is, and it's interesting because we can cover the entire country in the same amount of time. And that means we can get all the data across the country in a very short period of time, all verified. And that takes us to the next level. Next slide, please. Another area we're helping out is we're helping the Bureau of Statistics to crowdsource commodity prices across the country. The way that we determine inflation is by getting data on commodity prices. But before now, it took months to get that data. Before you analyze it, your inflation has changed several times. It's just amazing, right? So now we can do it in under 3 days. Crowdsource commodity prices all across the country. And who is doing this? The mothers and wives who normally go to the markets and buy things. They don't mind pulling out their phones and doing a lot more data gathering, knowing that they'll get some extra reward in return for it. And the fact that it also exposes, they also have this belonging, the fact that they are contributing to a greater purpose. Because all the data that is collected from their area, in the end, it still goes back to improving service delivery in their community. Next slide, please. And for us, it's an amazing social impacts, which I just mentioned, is the fact that first, they're able to supplement their income. Second, they feel like they're part of a greater good. They're contributing way more. And whatever improvements they see around them is as a result of the data that they are providing. So we try to tell their stories as much as we can. And these pictures kind of tell the stories of people who have to take bikes across makeshift roads to a community, or people who have to go through a stream or canoe to get to a community, but they're happy to do it. They take a picture and they smile. And it also helps them understand their surrounding more. And if we do go there for an initiative, they're happy to volunteer for it because they've seen exactly where the problem is. Next slide, please. So like I said, it's an infrastructure, right? And we've seen several applications across different industries. For governments, we've seen applications. We are working with the Ghana Statistics Service. They're trying to do something very innovative, which is the fact that getting every ministry to use the same system so that all that data goes into one data server. And I think it's amazing So one institution hosts everything together. And so that what that means is that whatever ministry is it, as the data is being collected from whatever community, local government, or whatever it is, everything is going into one place. No more transcribing, no more exporting to Excel and trying to put into another place. It just makes the whole process way faster. Now they can start to build models on top of that data and start to watch it over years. And I think the beauty of this is being able to do predictive analysis when you're able to gather data over years. So I commend what we're doing with the Ghana Statistics Commission. Looking forward to amazing things to come out of there. We're also helping businesses like FMCGs who are trying to better understand their supply chain. They're trying to fight counterfeits. They're trying to understand if their products are getting to the right stores. So we have people going to stores across the country and verifying with pictures of whether these products exist or not. And of course, nonprofits and international community, we're working with them to help them do GIS location mapping, do simple surveys, routine data collections, confirming if an infrastructure is where it's meant to be, things like that. It's been an exciting journey so far. Next slide. So for us, the next is next steps. We've been doing this for a while. We've built a model we believe can work, will work. We can scale across Africa. Next steps for us is to contribute. We have an obligation towards hitting our SDG targets. And the first thing is we need to be able to track it. So we're looking, and our vision is to be able to build national SDG trackers across each country, where the communities are the ones giving the feedback into the system that updates in almost real time once it's verified. So we're putting it open, and we're looking for people to join us in this journey. We have an exhibition booth out there. If you would like to join us and contribute to us in any way possible, we need partners who would work with us. For every country we go into, we need partners who would show us around. I mean, we know Africa, we are from Africa, it's one Africa, but we need partners in every country. And we've been getting tremendous support from the Bureau of Statistics in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Madagascar, in Sierra Leone, and Liberia. So the more we work with them, the more we're able to faster get into these markets and build the network and then get it done. Policy also from the governments should be willing, the government needs to be willing to have people collect data freely and openly and present it to the national community. And finally is funding. Today we're doing short surveys, we're doing routine data collections. We're going to take it a step further by doing more complex surveys, and we're going to need to build capacity. So we'll need funding to build capacity. But the beauty is that once we've built the capacity once, all we need to do is to constant capacity building, which is not going to be like the initial investment, and to try and grow the network, improve the capacity to do more complex surveys on a routine basis. We look forward to speaking with everyone. Next slide should be the end. Thanks for having me here.
Hello, this is Ines for remote moderation. So we do have two questions, one comment and a question. So it's from Akinremi Peter Tawo. He's saying, aside from data generation, there is need for user education on how to read and sieve out useful information from data and its application. And he's asking how accessible is the data being generated and respect for user privacy. Thank you.
Shut up. Thanks for that. Yeah, I agree with him, his comments. So right now, like I said, we work with organizations. So the organization who approaches us owns the data that we collect for them. What they do with it is their decision within their privacy policies. But what we really want to do, and I mean, we put in for a grant recently, we want to do like a water resource mapping all across Nigeria, and we want it all entirely open. So a lot of that will be determined by the funder or the project owner, on how they intend to use the data. And we will also start to sponsor projects that we can make open. So we intend to have an open data portal. We'll probably call it opendata.crowdforce.com, where we will do simple projects like crowdsourcing water resources across the country and make it all open with pictures, and everyone can collaborate with it. And the more we can get permission to make more data open, the more we will do. Thank you.
Thank you, Tommy. So I think Omar is online. He's ready to do his presentation. Omar, if you're online, can you speak up? Omar, can you hear me? Okay. Yes, we can hear you. Kindly introduce yourself, and then we proceed. Are you going to use the presentation, or you just talk? Sure. Hello, Omar. Hello. Yes, I can hear you. I think time is up. Can you please run up? Thank you very much, Omar. I think we have two other presentations, and I think if you can help me so that we just brief it and then we move on to the next part. When we get to the next part, I think we'll have more time, and then the presentation that you make, we can still discuss it there. So if that's fine, then we'll move to Tanya. So it should be a brief one.
I'm trying.
Try hard.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to try and be as brief as possible, and I'll give you the case of Lebanon, please.
For the record, can you please introduce yourself, then where the country you're coming from?
Okay, I'm Tanya Zaroubi, head of the interoperability team at the Ministry of Administrative Reform in Lebanon. Okay, second. All right. The Lebanese government in 2014 embarked on devising a strategy and roadmap to reform the process of business registration in the country. And this started the initiative for data protection, data sharing, interoperability, and all the ones listed here in front of you. The first deliverable of this strategy was the Lebanese government interoperability framework with all its components, stressing on governance, the principles, the interoperability levels, which are organizational, legal, technical, semantics, and of course, we need to have the agreements between all the stakeholders that we will be working on. Plus the service model. Next. Yes, please. So the most important, one of the most important components of the government interoperability framework is the Lti Service Model, which I will explain very briefly. It's going to be through a national interoperability, through a single point of contact, whereas we're going to have a portal, and it will be the one-stop shop for all the transactions for the government. Now, the first initiative will be about a project which is called the commercial registration of companies, and it will be through the interoperability framework. And the way it's going to be, it's through a domain. Each sector will have its own domain interoperability basic service with all the institutions working together and interchanging the data. Please, next. Another sector would have, of course, another domain to work on. I'm trying to be as quick as possible. Please, next slide. Our basis for this, of course, is going to be the data, where we have established a data dictionary and a standard form for this project, which has already started. The data dictionary will make sure to put all the elements of data needed among the three stakeholders, which I will explain very briefly who they are, and it will most importantly say who is the owner of this data and who is the one who is going to push the data to the others. There always has to be a single point for entry of data. We don't want to replicate and enter the data in many places as we currently do right now in all our databases in the government. Please, the second. The project is called the Company Registration through the interoperable platform. It is a one-stop shop for commercial registration, for business registration processes. It's going to develop a commercial register that will be the single point of interaction of all the business community with the public and private sectors. It's going to be improving the business environment in Lebanon, introduce a national legal entity identifier for the companies, because right now we don't have a single entity that is unique for a company. In every database, the company identifier is slightly different than in another database. For example, in one of the stakeholders, it has a commercial registration number. In another one, it has part of it and not all of it. And this project, one of the things we are going to do is to clean up the data in those three stakeholder databases so that we can create a clean one database that will be shared by the three stakeholders. Of course, this eventually we are hoping to improve the investment climate in Lebanon. The stakeholders are going to be the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Justice, and the Ministry of Labor. The Ministry of Finance is where the tax authority is. Ministry of Justice, we have where the commercial register resides. And in the Ministry of Labor, we have the National Social Security Fund. The three stakeholders, those are the main ones to interact together for the data of the companies. The first instance, it is registered at the commercial register, but also, of course, to carry on with the transaction and to make sure that this company is legal and it has to pay its taxes. And of course, it's going to have employees where they have to be registered in the National Social Security Fund. The data is shared among those three stakeholders just to make sure that all the data is correct. The enablers also are the ones you see around this, which is the Ministry of Economy and Trade, where all the foreign companies are registered. Of course, we have the Lebanese Central Bank for other data. The Civil Registry, Status Registry, is where the civil status data is registered. So anybody who owns a company and is a partner must have the digital ID, the unique identifier, the Lebanese unique identifier, which also exists in the Civil Status Registry. And these also have to communicate to authenticate the shareholders and all the people who are related into the company. Of course, we have also the general security forces where they have a unique ID number for foreigners, and the Bar Association, because all our companies to be registered, you need to have a lawyer to register the company. Now, to start on the data, which we found in those three main databases in the tax reform, in the tax, where in the Ministry of Finance, in the Commercial Register, and in the National Social Security Fund, we wanted to do an analysis of the data. The linking of the three databases was very difficult. There is also variances in the name of what we all call the legal entities. Legal entities are companies or are sole merchants that have their own trading. And we also found significant differences in the data sets, because whenever you are updating data in one database, sometimes the data is not being updated in the other database. So what are the core problems? It's the inability to link the three identifiers and the significant variances in the data that is being captured in the three databases. When we looked at the number of records, even the number of records vary in the three databases. In front of you, you will see that in the Commercial Register, we have 362,582 companies, whereas in the Ministry of Finance, we have only 164,306, and the Ministry of Labor, we have around 128,762,000. Now those three, oh, it's not showing. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, the numbers probably are listed in the top. Those three could be companies that are dormant in the Commercial Register, companies that they should be closed and they are not, because they have to pay a lot of taxes or a lot of fees to close their companies, so they are not doing anything. So that's why you find discrepancies also between the National Social Security and the tax. You will find that not all companies are actually letting it be known that they have employees that benefit from the National Social Security. Okay, let's go. This is a quick slide to show the kind of, next one, kind of matching. The databases, of course, the Ministry of Justice, the Commercial Register is an open data. Everybody can look at it. It's partly digitized. The Ministry of Finance, we have confidential data, so it's not open. It's definitely protected and secure, and it's digitized. And the Ministry of Labor, it is, of course, confidential data, and it's digitized. Please, next. The data conversion process, of course, we're going to have special forms. We're going to introduce the unique legal entity. And one important message is each stakeholder knows her own data, and there is going to be a team from those stakeholders who are going to work on the data. The status of the project, it already, the expression of interest is launched already on the 13th December, and the strategy of the data cleaning has started. And anybody who would like to look at the terms of reference, they will see it on the website of amsar.gov.lb. Finally, I'd like to invite you also at 3 o'clock to room 12A, where we have also our digital transformation of the Lebanese telecommunication sector set up. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I had to be very quick.
Thank you, Ms. Tanya. So we have the last presentation, and with this one, you have to be super brief for us to save more time to go into the discussions. Yeah. So you come and show you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to present today on the topic of open data, the case of Kosovo. My name is Untitled. I'm a university professor of computer sciences in Kosovo, and I have worked for the government for several years in the field of open data. Next slide, please. So the Kosovo Open Data Initiative began 3 years ago, and as we say, a big journey begins with a small step. It began with an open data strategy and action plan, which involved public, private institutions, and NGOs. And the overall objective in the beginning, it was to improve transparency. And then further on, it was to simulate the business environment and to create demand and supply for the open data. Moreover, the objective of the strategy and action plan was to harness the ICTs and to foster innovation using the open data. Next slide, please. So open data for development is an objective that was from the beginning streamlined in Kosovo. And what we're doing is that we are leveraging the open data for evidence-based policies. We started with public procurement open data and with census open data, also with financial open data, which seem to be the most important in the beginning of the process of making open data available in Kosovo. Further on, after we have opened the financial data and the public procurement data, there was a need to open up the environment data, and especially in the field of air quality, land, and water quality. Moreover, there is a strong focus now in the consumption or consumers' open data, where we want to track the different consumer behaviors and where we want to strengthen the businesses. The overall goal of open data now is to foster the economy. On top of that, we have started with the open data for agriculture and nutrition, and with the help and the support of the Global Open Data Coalition, which is the GODAN, we have started opening data for agriculture and nutrition, and this has proved to be very important for strengthening the farmers and for overall economic development in Kosovo. Next slide, please. So, which are the tools and instruments for collecting open data? Open data collection is one of the most difficult process in the open data initiative. And we're using two approaches. The first approach is via surveys, which are online and on-site. And the second approach is via administrative data. However, there's a big challenge in the need for qualitative data, because the data which are being collected, either via surveys or administrative data, often lack the quality. In case of surveys, these are mostly based like subject-based data, which could be sometimes inaccurate, and it is very difficult to measure and to verify the accuracy of those data. In terms of administrative data, there the challenge is that most of the time, these administrative data are outdated, and we need more up-to-date administrative data. Also, there is a strong need to better and fully harness the potential of ICTs for open data collection, extraction, and curation. And if we harness the tools that we have at hand today, the ICT tools, then we would have better data collection and better qualitative data. Next slide, please. So which are the challenges for Kosovo Open Data Initiative? First of all, there is still 3 years later, a limited available open data. There's an open data portal with a dozen of data sets, but there is a lack of resources for data collection and for measurement. Kosovo has high connectivity and very strong infrastructure for ICTs. There is an 80% internet penetration in Kosovo. There is widely available ICTs and computers and servers and data centers. However, the user centricity is lacking because we lack on the usage of open data, and the users are still not using as much as they should the open data. So we need to tackle this. We need to work on user centricity, and we need to work on the ways to harness the potential of open data for usage. And we need to increase the open data usage in Kosovo. Next slide, please. So streamlining open data is the most important thing based on our experience. And we have to look which are the ways forward on streamlining open data. And this is an ongoing process. And based on our experience, streamlining open data is made possible via the following global mechanisms. First of all, with United Nations through the Sustainable Development Goals. This is a very good mechanism which is now fostering the increase of usage of open data and collection of open data. Second of all, we are streamlining open data via World Bank. And this is also very important because World Bank is helping us a lot through the TFCB mechanism, TFSCB, which is the Trust Fund for Statistical Capacity Building. And they've been an amazing help, an amazing player, global player, in opening up the data, including in Kosovo. So based on our experience, they are also one of the ways to streamline open data, and we're looking forward to collaborate. Another streamlining mechanism is the Global Coalition for Sustainable Development Goals, and this, again, comes from the UN and the World Bank initiative. It is a cross-cutting initiative, and we're working with them. We are streamlining the open data with them as well. And finally, I would like to emphasize GODAN. GODAN, which is the Global Open Data for Agriculture and Nutrition. I'm very happy to sit here next to the CEO of GODAN, Mr. André Laperrière, who is working on this and who has actually helped a lot in opening up the data for agriculture and nutrition in Kosovo. Next slide, please. So which are the short and medium-term objectives for open data as we move towards this process? First of all, addressing data gaps and financing. There is a lack of resources in Kosovo, and there is a lack of budget for opening up the data. So we need to find out new financing instruments in order to foster this process. Second of all, encouraging data use. There is a lack of user centricity and lack of usage, so we need to find ways of increasing the usage by means of ICTs, by means of creation of businesses. Third of all, strengthening the open data ecosystem by creating new businesses based on open data. And this is a huge opportunity because when you open up data, businesses have another levy to create new businesses. For example, if we open up transport data, we could create private businesses that make it possible to buy tickets via those businesses, who provide a better interface and who are using the open data for transportation from the public institutions. So that would be a huge opportunity. And also other opportunities in the economic environment. Fourth of all, improving open data systems. So in order to improve existing open data systems, the open data portals, and the open data collection mechanisms, we need to work more on harnessing the ICTs. And as we advance in the technology field, we are having new tools, we're having new ways, new instruments, and we have to be sure that we are using those tools. Most of the time, those tools are free and available to be used. And we have to make sure that we keep up with the updates in technology and to make the most out of them. And finally, the fifth short and medium term is the policy and enabling environment for open data. This I would say is one of the most important aspects in going on with the process. We have to keep up the momentum, and we have to keep up with the new and updated policies, with the new and updated strategies and action plan for opening up the data. Next slide, please. So which is the way forward for open data? First, foster global collaboration with UN, World Bank, Millennium Development Goals, GODAN. We have to further foster this collaboration, and we have to find new ways to collaborate. Second, increase the demand and supply. Opening up the data, it all depends on how much is the demand and how much is the supply. So we have to find new ways in increasing the demand and also increasing supply. More we have supply, we will have a higher demand. And vice versa, more demand, we will have higher supply. So this is a triple helix between institutions, public institutions, private institutions, and academia. And we have to work in increasing the demand and supply for opening data. Also, use of ICTs. We have to find new ways of increasing the ICTs. And finally, innovate with open data. As I said, there are new businesses being created as we speak. And opening up the data increases enormously the innovation in the business sector, because businesses could collect those data and then link those data between the different data sets, between the different open data sources, and create new alternatives in solving problems and issues in the society. So with this, I would like to thank Mr. André Lapierre, the CEO of GODAN, Mr. Wisdom Donker, the head of Africa Open Data Initiative. Very glad to meet him and to work with him. And also all the panelists and all the stakeholders in the open data movement. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We'll take some few questions, and then we move straight to the next session, next part of the session. So if you have a question for them, kindly raise your hand. Okay, so the first
Thank you
1
very
minute.
Thank you very much. My question is to Tommy. Great initiative you guys are doing. Really love it. Question is, what are the incentives you give the people that work for you, that work with you on gathering the data? For example, I know that like the local guides program that is available for Google, you probably have to do that to get people on board. And secondly is, how do you get those people on your platform?
I've been told to be brief. So first is sometimes through airtime. Second time is through cash disbursements. And then you talk about how we get them. So it turns out that there were already pockets of networks all across the country. So what we did was, I hope you can hear me. So what we did was approach those networks and then kind of create an avenue to onboard all their agents, train them and onboard them on that same day, and then put them on a group where we can constantly share educational materials to get them better. Yeah.
Raymond Sanner from the Center for Socio-Economic Development. That's a Geneva-based ECOSOC accredited NGO. We've participated in the 2030 agenda and with UNDESA from the start. And having listened to the very interesting presentations of the panelists, I was just wondering, for countries, for instance, I'm making reference to the presentation on Lebanon, the struggle there is that you have formal and informal societal structures, which can be more difficult to get a meaningful monitoring in terms of the SDGs than if you almost had no multiplicity of informal, formal structures. So the leapfrogging that our colleague was suggesting for Africa, wouldn't it be best to find a way to use ground truth methodology, meaning mobile phones, to leave the complexity of informality and formality, as is the case, for instance, in Lebanon, as well as in many other countries, and to go into mobile phone-based direct data collection from the ground, as was exemplified what Tommy is doing in Africa?
Is it for Lebanon? Or?
Okay, brief. Just to be brief, the data we will be collecting actually already exists in the databases of the institutions, their government institutions. So, and it's official data, and we will be later using mobile ways of not gathering the data, but actually displaying the data. Now, I can't see right now how we're going to get official data. Well, I can see your point, yes.
Mr. Andre will also add.
This is a very interesting question. I don't pretend to have the absolute wisdom unless answering this question, but I see from different parts of the world 4 approaches to this issue of collecting data, whether in informal or informal systems, with various levels of success. One is some places they rely very much, whether it is NGOs or other leaders of opinion, but on some passionate champions that go around and mobilize and get people to provide data. And that works to some extent and for a certain time. Second approach, some have tried to pay people to provide data. The downside with that is that it sometimes works for a little while, but then the reliability of the data becomes questionable. At times people will tell you whatever data you want just so that they get paid for it. So it doesn't quite work. And third one is, I think it's really the sustainable one. It has to do with a business model of some kind. So if giving data, or whether it is in the context of a survey or any other form of data collection, is about as exciting as filling an income tax report. I mean, nobody really likes that. You're busy doing other things, and then these guys, they come and they start asking questions, and you don't have time for this really. And even if you do, then you don't really see the return coming out of that. So the best way is if you can find a way to get a return, some kind of a benefit out of it. That's what governments are trying to do by providing service. In fact, the former director of the World Bank was picturing it like that. He said, you know, governments and their research centers, they have a lot of information, which in fact citizens pay through their taxes, in fact, so they own it in some way. But by making it available to all, we make it available, among others, to private sector that can then develop applications, ways to simplify the data, to make it more accessible to people, to provide services. Somebody mentioned transport as an example. It's not, my field is agriculture, but I use other ones also. In the City of London, when they decided to open their data about transport, they had a problem, a congestion problem. Basically, some lines, metro lines or train lines, were overcrowded while some others were unused. So there were peak times when it was just jam and other times not so much. So they thought, okay, people will stop complaining, we'll just tell them the way it is. So that was the original idea. But then it had a surprising, very good effect for them because people found, and right now with my phone, I can tell you where my bus is right now at this very moment. And if I see that I would have missed it, then probably I would walk, or I would take the train, or I'd take the subway. I'll take another way. So the unforeseen impact is that it regulated the flow of traffic, so which was very good for the consumers because this way they don't wait for a bus that's already gone. They take the fastest way to get there. But the interesting part for the City of London, because that's often the problem in business cases around that, who pays for making the data available and keeping it up to date? Well, for the City of London, the return on their investment, what it did cost them to make that available, and now the influx they get and the better use of their traffic system is 70 to 1. 70 to 1. So if you want a good business case, that's one right there. But the last one, and now I'm back to agriculture, is in the end of the day, and that's human nature, to do any kind of effort or action, especially if it comes out of the ordinary, out of what you normally do, there has to be a benefit for it. And I'm just thinking of one nice example, I think, from Thailand. It may not apply everywhere, but that's an example. Over there, they have cooperatives where they thought, okay, we're going to provide data to farmers, weather data, market data, data that will help them grow their stuff better. So the way they work, or the way they used to work, farmers would go to their cooperative to buy their seeds for the year or whatever they need, and they would say, okay, I'd like this year to plant this rice, and maybe they'd get an advice, maybe not. They try to build up the capacity of these cooperatives, and now not only do they provide advice to the farmers and which type of rice this year is going to be best, or when is the best time to plant, and things that can help or harm their crop this year, but they computerized it, so to speak. Each of these cooperatives in that project, they got an iPad. So when you come there, their advantage, of course, is that the plots are pretty well defined, which is not the case everywhere, but over there it is. So I can come there and I can say, okay, I have plot number 3A5B, and I intend to plant rice this year, but I'm not really sure if I should plant this one or this one. Well, they're going to put that in and tell me that this year, based on current conditions, this one will give you better results than that one. So it's very helpful for the farmer, but it's also helpful for the cooperative because at the end of the day, now they know everything that's growing in their neighborhood so that they can plan, okay, we need more seeds this year, or we need more fertilizer, or less of something because the demand is going this way or that way. So it's an example of a win-win situation, which some may say leads also to privacy issues, but that's another discussion we can have.
Thank you, Andre. We'll take one more question. Okay, so two more questions, and then we'll move into the next session.
Hi, my name is Anju, and I work for the Pacific community. We work with the governments of the 22 Pacific Island countries in the area of agriculture, health, etc. There are quite a few challenges in relation to data, but one of the key challenges that we have is the issue of data sharing policies and agreement. It has been quite difficult for us to enforce this because people are reluctant to share data. That's one. Two is The other aspect is having a sustainability plan or an exit strategy. Projects come and go. People create data management systems. When the project ends, it becomes redundant, and then you lose all that data. So the two things that, the one thing that I would like to ask is that if there are any strategies that can overcome these challenges that we have, because it's a growing concern for us, and we are constantly looking for some solutions and also opportunities to sort of collaborate and find partnerships in doing this work in the Pacific region. We have a big data hub, and we collect a lot of the data across the Pacific in a lot of areas: climate change, climate data, resilient, agriculture, health, etc. So these are some of the issues that we're currently facing, and it would be nice to get some strategies on that.
Thank you very much. I think we should take the last question.
Good morning. My name is Barnabé Lucas. I'm from Brazil, and I'm here by the IGF program, the youth program. I think my question is it's close to hers. I would like to know more about how can we ensure the quality of data, especially in the Kosovo case, because you talk in your presentation a lot about the challenge to collect the data, but how you ensure the quality of the data? So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, one last question. Please, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. This is Iftikhar Shah from Pakistan. There is some suggestions, points, and basically open data, to progress on the open data, particularly in the developing countries. Still in developing countries, the digitization process is challenges. And the developing countries are still working on the automation of their processes in terms of agriculture, in terms of health, in terms of citizen civics automations. So the first step is basically the digitization. And when the digitization will be happened, particularly in the developing countries, then the concept like the open data will be accessible. So my request to the panel that what are your recommendations? That digitization process is a long-term process. So how developing countries should make a strategy to progress on open data in terms of maybe in step-by-step process? Thank you.
Thank you. So, Andrew.
Okay, I'm going to try to answer three of you. So first of all, regarding data quality, there are many mechanisms to ensure the data quality and to verify the accuracy of data, and starting from data collection, data curation, and verification with the different bodies, etc. But what is the most important in this aspect is that once you open up the data, once the data is available, then the public can challenge those data, and the public can ensure that those data are accurate. If we do not open up the data, then nothing has to be challenged, and these data will be taken as a fact. So this is one of the more of the reasons why we have to open up the data. In terms of data sharing, as the lady said, as you've said, you're very right. People are reluctant to share data, and sometimes no matter what kind of strategy, no matter what kind of a public body for data exchange, like a data exchange agency, things will be very difficult because, as you've said, people are reluctant to share and to collect. But on the other hand, people are not reluctant to share, let's say, for example, private data, which is being shared on the social network. So we have to work on this. We have to make sure that open data is well understood by the public, and it is being embraced by the public. Open data is not about personal data. It's data that can be freely shared, used without and modified without any obligation. But it is being it doesn't have any like personal context. So if we open up, if we share our information, private information on social networks, why we shouldn't share the data which is collected by the different organizations, public and private organizations? Because open data is not just about public institutions, remember, it's also about private institutions. So we have to work on this and to find the new ways of sharing the open data. And finally, the question regarding digitalization, I fully agree. If there is no connectivity in some country, then opening up data is very difficult. You have no way to use them. But the good news is that connectivity is improving, and in some areas, of course, it's still, we are still far from that, but there is it is a precondition. So we have to have connectivity in order to have open data. And I would say we could go like in parallel with connectivity, increasing the availability of open data, because as I've said, this will improve the economic environment. You can just imagine if you have open data available for any kind of sector, how much businesses and what kind of businesses you would be able to create. And those businesses would have not just web interfaces, but also mobile interfaces. And sometimes an interface is sufficient to create a new business or to innovate with a new business. And so I think we have to keep up with this momentum and to leverage all of the strong reasons why we need open data, and to work more towards this field so that public and private institutions open up the data and we move with this very important process. Thanks.
Thank you, Doc. We'll move to the next session. So we are going to move to the next session, but before we do that, I'll hand over to Andre to continue the next session. You introduce him, yeah. Okay, okay. What's the name?
Marilyn Cade. I just want to resume my Mistress of Ceremonies role for a moment and introduce, we're going to have the opportunity to hear from Thorben Fredriksson, who is the chief of one of the very important parts of UNCTAD that is engaged in helping to measure, analyze, and publish all of the present approach of the data gathering and analysis that UNCTAD does. And I've asked him to, Wisdom and I asked him to join us. He has competing opportunities, so he's graciously changed his schedule and is joining us. He'll be explaining to you a little bit about his job here, his role, and the UNCTAD role, and then I'm going to hand out a short flyer, and he will also say a little bit more about e-commerce week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mistress. I just want to spend a few minutes with you, and I thank you very much for this opportunity to share with you some more work. I understand that you're discussing throughout this morning the link between data collection and the Sustainable Development Goals. And from UNCTAD's perspective on this digital dimension to development, it's very much focused on how ICT can be used in enterprises, how we can strengthen the digital and ICT sector. But increasingly, there's a strong focus on e-commerce. How do we measure that? And the sad thing is that if you go to developing countries, we have hardly any statistics in this area. And that makes it very, very difficult for governments to actually prepare and implement effective policies in this area. So we have, when UNCTAD had its, UNCTAD is the UN Conference on Trade and Development. We have our offices in this building. We're a global body within the UN, and we, at our last ministerial conference we held in Nairobi in 2016, member states decided to set up a new intergovernmental group of experts on e-commerce and the digital economy. The first session of that group was held in October this year, only 2 months ago. And one of the concrete outcomes of that was a decision by member states to establish a new working group under the intergovernmental group of experts dedicated to measuring e-commerce and the digital economy. We'll see that among the OECD countries, there is some data available, but even there is very limited, especially if you want to look at how trade in the digital sphere is evolving. We have good data on trading goods, fairly good data in trading services, but it's very difficult to distinguish how much of the trade that is a result of electronic commerce. At the same time, we have, for instance, Sustainable Development Goals number 17, and there is a target that is aimed at improving the share of developing countries, and especially the least developed countries, in global trade. Now, if more and more trade goes digital, if more and more trade involves e-commerce, then we need to ensure that developing countries also go digital, otherwise they will simply not have a chance to participate in the growth of trade online. So therefore it's very important to have this gathering of data in relevant areas. So with this new working group, we will call on member states to send their experts from national statistical offices or other bodies that can be involved in collecting data. And then they will come here to Geneva, and we will talk about how one can foster the data collection and data analysis in this area. But given the way that digitalization works, we will also have to have a close collaboration with the private sector, because a lot of the data that is relevant to measure what's going on here will come only from the use of various digital platforms, e-commerce platforms, payment platforms, and so on and so forth. The question of data and development has featured in all the e-commerce weeks that we have held so far. It is a week that discusses anything related to e-commerce, digital economy, and development. And it's a very multi-stakeholder approach. We have a lot of participants from the governments, from the international organizations, from civil society and the private sector, and also academia. So I'll just encourage you to, whatever you discuss in this context, especially to the extent that it also touches upon the e-commerce or the economic dimension of development, keep the e-commerce week in mind and see if we can also contribute to further the dialogue that you're starting here today in this context. So I will not take up more of your time. I'm in around this place, so if you need to get hold of me, I would suggest you go through the mistress, and she will know where to find me. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, Andre, I'll hand over to you to continue with the next session.
Thank you very much. I think we've gradually slid into the final session, which is, I think, quite okay. What I was discussing with Wisdom is that instead of breaking up in groups, I don't know about you, but I like very much this kind of exchange and dialogue that we're having. So I think we should maybe continue that way, if that's okay. So first, I would like to just add a few words on the questions that were asked just before this intervention, and then maybe introduce you the 5 points, some of which we've partially addressed, but that we should maybe discuss a little bit more. First, it's hard to come after Driard, because what he said is you read my mind. I was just about to say it. I think what you said was perfect, especially in relation to the quality of data. If you think of Wikipedia, for instance, that's the example I like to quote, because when it first came out, it was full of mistakes, as we know. But in a fairly short period of time, it improved quite a bit. And now it may not be perfect, but it's quite good. because it was exposed, it was open. So the minute there was a mistake, somebody somewhere around the world would point it out and got it corrected. So that's one advantage of opening data. But the second one, which is really a fundamental point that we're hammering a lot, and it has to do with breaking the silos or linked open data, as it's called nowadays. There was a nice workshop in Berlin, in fact, recently on this issue. Because when you combine data from different sources, it allows for many different things. It allows for one thing to cross-check the data that you have. I'll give you an example. In one of the countries where we work, when we started comparing trade data with production, agricultural production data, we found that according to statistics, they exported more than what they produced. So obviously there was a mistake there. Other places, according to statistics, they would have consumed incredible quantities of sugar, which would have made everybody diabetics in no time. So obviously there was another mistake there. So by comparing, you do nice things. And then you can become also much more efficient. Quote another country where we work, where they're saying that because it's very costly and that country happens to be very big, they can only afford to do ag surveys once every 10 years. And even then, they don't go everywhere because some parts of the countries are very difficult to reach. So that means for most of the time, they navigate in the dark a little bit and trying to find, what's going on in their country. This is where geodata comes up, because the most recent satellites are extremely accurate, not only in telling you where things are growing or not growing, but how they're doing. So you can use it, among other things, for predictive analytics. You know much better what surface is being cultivated, but also how your crops are evolving throughout the season and being better, in a better position to predict what's going to happen. So that's linked open data. And then we spoke about digitization of data. Statistic for you, in 1987, less than 1.5% of the world's data was in a digital format. In 2005, it was 97%. So it's, the issue is not so much to get digital format. The problem is that it's very fragmented, as my colleague said earlier. People tend to keep data on their computer, and it's the sharing of this data is inefficient at this point in time, which leads to another problem beyond the fact that it leads to duplications and the fact that it's not shared. But the day the person retires, for instance, oftentimes somebody takes away the computer, reformats it or whatever, and that data is lost. So that's one of the ways one of the things people are trying to address by having these repositories where research data in particular can be stored and kept for posterity. Now I hear, I'm going to interrupt for a second, because I hear that Mr. Mokhtar Yedali, the Chief ISD in the African Union, is here and has a contribution to make. So I would like to give Mr. Mokhtar a chance to speak. I don't know where he is. Where is he? He's coming. Ah, you're here. Please, you're welcome.
Hi. Shall I start now or shall I?
Yes. Need to press here.
We have short time, so. Is that on? It's on. Yeah, it's on. Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity. The good thing about speaking last most of the time is because everybody has said what you have to say, and then you don't have to say anything more. I'll try to be very short and sweet and straight to the point by saying something that has not been said, so to make it a little bit spicy. Now, first of all, most of the time when people speak about the SDGs, it is thought as it is some kind of program for developing countries, which is actually not the case, because the climate change issue and the environmental issue has made it also universal in general. Number two, the concept of developing or implementing those programs are always kind of linked with the AIDS programs, which is actually not the case, because most of the countries now should and must invest by putting their domestic fundings. The African Union specifically has decided recently that they will be using 1% of the export of all countries to use it for the development programs. with the hope that one day we'll be actually independent from aid and international actually support. As you certainly have said, the statistics that are actually, or data that should be generated to address many of the indicators that we do have, probably when you look at the number of indicators we do have, 230 indicators for 193 countries. It's a huge amount of data. But the good thing is technology now is capable of helping us to do a lot of things. We have so much of data, so much of personal data about everything, geolocation, sensors, and the big data, that somehow we can say that it is the end of probability science and the rise of correlation functions, if we speak in terms of mathematics. So we go exactly to, we are now capable to exactly transform probabilities into exact science. But this performance of technology doesn't really help us in the same time to get those appropriate data, because most of the time the data we are having are very poor, and therefore cannot be meeting the requirements to have very informed decisions about what's happening. So coming back to the SDGs, from Africa point of view, we do also have our what we call Agenda 2063. We have a vision whereby we have the same indicator that we are trying to track and to do what is mainly in a very coordinated manner is actually in line with the SDGs. The problem we are facing is the poor quality of the data we are collecting most of the time. Although we have put the system to collect them, because we have started one of the biggest program that could address most of the SDGs, which is actually the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa, PIDA. And it has been actually on since 2010. And the program covers the ICT sector, the energy sector, the transport sector, and the transboundary water sectors, and which actually allows their development will allow to address most of the SDGs goal, specifically with regard to the energy sector. We have started recently what we call the African Renewable Energy Initiatives, which the European Union and most of the countries have actually taped on the program. Billions of dollars have been committed or actually pledged for, but they haven't been put there. This all will allow to meet all those goals and aspirations we do have in our Agenda 2063. Again, the PIDA is been, the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa has been actually on since 2010. Some of it has been implemented, specifically with regard to the ICT sector. 2 of the priority programs out of 3 have been implemented within the continent, which actually has improved a lot the internet connectivity, specifically in putting in place the internet exchange point systems in each and every country, saving $65 million going out of the country that could be used for, out of the continent, to be used for other programs that are going to happen. We definitively still face this issue of collecting the right data and the quality that is required. We are improving. Technology is improving, and we hope that will be next year we'll be having better than we had, and the next year having better that we will have next year, etc., etc. So this is all I wanted to share with you swiftly, nicely, and quickly, and I will be glad to answer to any questions that will be provided. Thank you very much.
So the floor is open for questions to Mr. Mukhtar. Please.
I can't believe I am very clean. Kati.
Hello, Mokhtar. And thank you for enlightening us on the progress of PIDA and other projects which are close to our heart. Now, is Africa a data desert? I've just come from another session on artificial intelligence and policy making. And one of the risks that was pointed out at that area was that a lot of these robots and technologies that learn from data are learning from biased data sets, where data sets from certain regions or certain populations are missing. And I'd like Mark to comment about whether a lot of that missing data is from the African continent, which everyone is now looking at as a very good market for their products. But their products have not learned on African data. Maybe just related to that, do we have a data culture? Or do we have more of an opinion culture where we listen to people who are authoritative, but we're not really looking for the data and trying to build models ourselves? Okay, so those are my two questions.
Wonderful questions. Let me first answer to the first one with regard to the missing data. Now, there is a principle. If you let people defining you, you will never be you. Meaning, if somebody is generating outside of you a data and applies to you, then you will never be you itself. And this is whenever at any point of time we start collecting data, our specific data, we have been told, no, why do you have to do that? Because, for instance, ITU has done it. Yes, but ITU has collected data, for instance, or World Bank or any other institution collected data and did their own analysis based on their own perception criteria and values. And this is where it is important for me to have my own data and do my own analysis and do my own definitions to defend myself. And this is where it's very important for you, the question you have asked. In fact, we as the specificities of the developing world actually are really being missed, because we have the tendency to standardize everything, to say that everyone, every criteria apply to everyone. And I will tell you, give you one example that happened to me during my first year as an engineer. When I started doing my first planning network, this was 20 years ago, I have been told that the methodology for you to define the number of circuits you know for a telephone is to assume that you have a number of teachers, a number of doctors, a number of whatever professionals, and those, each of them is supposed to have a phone. So therefore, you just take this population, you extrapolate, and you get the number of phones required, and you define your circuit. This was an engineering methodology based on what we call the economic approach. Now, if you go back on that time, back in most of the African countries, the doctor cannot afford himself a phone. The teacher could not afford himself a phone. So therefore, I cannot assume that the income of the doctor or a teacher in Africa is equal to the income of a doctor somewhere else in the United States or in France. And therefore, my definition of circuits is biased. So this is the same thing at this point of time. If today we continue comparing an apple in Africa or an apple in Asia and do the same criteria to value them, I don't think that the approach will be at least as objective as it should be. Specificities has to be taken into consideration. Specific statistics has to be taken into consideration. And therefore, the analysis need to be appropriate to the culture, because the perception of privacy, for instance, or the perception of democracy are not in the same. There is no universal values, if I may say, to define a lot of things that may happen in a certain place. Place, culture, and individual need to be actually taken into consideration. Second question, no, Kati, we don't have so far in Africa a data counter. We don't have it so far, and I hope, and this is idea just for, we hope we will be thinking of something like that and contribute to the market you have set, which is actually to the artificial intelligence. I hope I did answer to your questions. Marilyn.
Marilyn Cade speaking. Thank you. I must say that, and I really want to compliment all of you on how interesting and informative this has been, and how much I feel that we're all learning from each other, and how important it's going to be now to kind of take the step of so what, right? But I want to just make a couple of quick, throw out a couple of quick ideas. I've heard statements from some of the speakers about the interest in finding partners and finding other data sources, et cetera. So I'm going to make a comment about that in just a minute and an idea I have. But I want to go back to the comment you made about, are we an opinion-based culture or are we an data-based or an information-based culture? I organized the session yesterday on fake news, disinformation, and misinformation. And one of the things we talked about was the problem about artificial intelligence learning from inaccurate information or biased information because of the way the marketing programs are established and the way the data is gathered. There are other problems in creation of false information where false websites are set up to sort of as a marketing ploy that make it look like there's things are going on that perhaps aren't. And I do think this idea, as we continue to work together, this idea about how do we get past opinion or misinformation is really something that's going to need a lot more discussion, particularly because there is so much data, there's always going to be an interest in trying to automate, use artificial intelligence, et cetera. So that's one point. The point I wanted to make is there are now 101 national and regional IGFs. So 101 countries have a national IGF. That's not true. There are 10 regionals. And as a matter of fact, Mokhtar is the major champion of the African IGF. But one thing I was thinking about, and Wisdom is the coordinator and champion of the IGF in Ghana. One thing I was thinking about is perhaps we should be thinking about how we broaden our inclusiveness of invitation to representatives such as yourself and some of the other speakers to come and speak at the national and regional IGFs as an objective, so that we are beginning to bring together these communities and these issues. The national and regional IGFs are very focused on achieving the SDGs. So just to throw that idea out, because I have two experts I see, one from Ghana and Mokhtar from the African continent, who are very familiar with the national and regional IGFs and the opportunity we might have to have a day zero event, which would also help to strengthen the work that needs to go on, but help to enhance the participation in the NRIs.
Thank you very much. By the way, my answer to you, Kati, was not very accurate in the matter of do we have a data counter. In fact, just because I was, in fact, and this is because Madeline has just triggered the idea. In fact, we are starting in January 2018 a huge program in which there is a digital platform to coordinate among all African stakeholders. And part of it, there is a statistics part which the member states and the national IGF forums and so on will be contributing. It is also goes in parallel with capacity building on internal governance forum, and we'll be setting up all national forums and even a school of internal governance that will be setting it in each and every country, moving up and having that platform where everybody can contribute with data, and therefore probably somehow create the data count. It's just the data counter didn't come really, but we will have now our own statistics and our own analysis with regard to the data that will be building. But again, this is specifically related to ICT matters. While in fact, when we come to the SDGs, it should be comprehensive. We should not actually limit ourselves to those data related only to ICT, national IGF, whatever it is, etc. But anything related to energy, transport, climate change, all those issues, fight against poverty, etc., all those aspirations, indicators we do have in this issue, we need to make sure that is involved. Now, we as ICT experts and people, do we have that luxury to go beyond our, how can I say, mandate? Because also we used to, sectorization, segmentation of all those activities has to be taken into account. But at least will be provide from our part what should be the contribution of ICT to the SDGs in general. So that at least we'll do that, hoping that one day we'll be having some comprehensive, coordinated mechanism that will allow everybody to have a real approach that will define the impact and the achievement of the SDGs in general. Question.
I wanted to follow up on the your point regarding artificial intelligence and then fake news, and how does that all add up into how could data be used, let's say, to foster fake news, and how could artificial intelligence algorithms use those data? Well, first of all, it is true that the fake news phenomenon and is becoming wide, and we have seen this in the social networks. And on the other hand, I would say that if we make data available, if we bring more data, this would enhance the verification systems and the verification algorithms. We already have, I think that we already have algorithms in artificial intelligence algorithms who are using data to verify sources, to verify facts. And the more we have data, the better the AI, the artificial intelligence algorithms would be. And as we move forward and as the new technologies are being developed, artificial intelligence systems are improving. And I will give you an example for that. In the past, we had the possibility to upload, for example, copied videos, let's say on YouTube, on Facebook, etc. And that video would not be taken down because it wouldn't be detected as copied. However, nowadays, we have artificial intelligence systems and algorithms who can track those videos and can automatically see that they are copied and they will be taken down. On the other hand, then what the users did, they stripped the video in the beginning and at the end of the video, and they uploaded only some portions of video. And then artificial intelligence algorithms were improved, and nowadays you can't even do that. You cannot even upload a video without the rights into YouTube or Facebook or other systems. So artificial intelligence is not something that will actually threaten the societies. It has the potential to actually make better societies. And all of that is if that is used properly. Because bear in mind that even with TV, internet, radio, all of these media mechanisms, they can be used for good and for bad. And so it is up to the users to determine how these will be used. And internet also has that kind of potential of being used for bad purposes. So artificial intelligence as well, it will have the good dimension and the bad dimension. But it is up to us to make regulations maybe, or to educate and to use mechanisms so that we can ensure that artificial intelligence is used for the good of societies and for the advancement of humankind. And there are many examples where artificial intelligence can improve the user experience and can improve the human life. So we have to make sure that we follow up on those examples, and we have to make sure that we do not create bad usages of the new systems such as artificial intelligence. Thanks.
Thank you. We have to keep track of the time. I see two more questions. One at the back. I'm sorry, this gentleman has been waiting for some time, and then one here, and one there, and then after that we'll start wrapping up a little bit. So,
thank you for sharing the experience of project in Africa. Of course, you faced a lot of challenges, and you adopted efficient strategies to resolve these challenges for moving forward on these projects. My question is that if the developing countries in other regions like Asia want to adopt your project experience as a case study, how they will follow? Thank you.
Shall we answer to that one, or shall we get the three and answer one?
I think we should take the three questions, if that's okay, and then it will be easier. So your turn, please, and then you.
Thank you so much. My name is Helga Mieling from Austria. I happen to be the coordinator for the SDGs in my ministry, which is the Ministry of Transport, Innovation and Technology. And I'm also in IGF now for 8 or 10 years, and I observe that the discussion is shifting focus. But we should not lose track. I meant to emphasize that SDGs are much or larger scale to be debated. So we have to take into account climate change, environment, all those issues. And therefore, my country has set up an interministerial working group where we are dealing with data provided by the National Statistical Institute, which is an entirely independent institution, working together with OECD, ITU, United Nations, and so on. So these data are really reliable and they are transparent. So everybody can look at the homepage and make up.
for me the same.
Exactly.
But you're based in Addis?
I'm based in Addis.
Okay.
I'm with IGF distribution. You mentioned something at the end
No. We're going to collect. We're starting in January.
Thank you. I'm glad you like it.
Constructing
Yes,
kind of
please.
digital platform for us to start,
I would
collection
like
of
that.
data, and
I
then
also like your
from there
intervention very much.
we'll see how it
So you're in
goes.
Geneva.
So what kind of data?
We are still at the level of the term of references to do that, but will be any data that
No,
will
we're
be
based in the
really
UK. I'm
helping
Canadian,
our
but we're based in the
policymakers
UK.
to take the appropriate decisions
I come here
with
when
regard
I'm
to the entire development of digital economy in Africa.
That's one of our
You know that I do
We know that we always survive with all that.
We have
Finally, if we don't get
that was
anything, we go to your
printed
data.
3 months ago.
You maybe if you want some information or if you want to share
Statistically,
something,
yes.
I can give you at least my card for this.
Kati, wonderful question. What have you been hiding? I haven't seen. I heard about you here and there, but I don't see you
I'm in
myself.
the neighborhood quite a bit, and I do speak very strongly.
I know that but because you are everywhere. I'm hearing about a good feedback about you, but I don't see you myself. Huh?
Avec plaisir. Ouais, c'est
Why
pas
you
loin.
don't come to Addis?
C'est juste de l'autre côté de la rivière, quoi.
We'll be clearing the room so that the next session can start at 12:10.
Voilà, c'est bien. Yes. We have a booth upstairs. African Union Commission. It's in front of ISOGA. You sit there, meet around lunchtime. Should be around 1. Yeah. All right.
I'm in the next presentation.
Okay.
You know what?
Tenemos como 4 o 5 minutos.
4 minutos.
Cosa cortita.
I think what you're doing is fantastic.
Aquí arriba. Siempre estas cosas son la misma gente que está arriba, abajo.
Ah, bueno. Vamos cambiando.
Sí. Tranquilísimo.
Vou estar com o celular aqui marcando direito.
Y si no, miras las caras de los que ya conoces. Les hablas a ellos.
Los miro a ustedes.
Claro.
Thank you.
Anyone, no?
Yes, anyway.
I like this, but in what situation is it? Can you please do some noise?